Welcome everyone to an underground car park, but not any underground car park, because we're buried beneath Gordon Murray Automotive's new global headquarters in Windlesham, Surrey, to meet this, Gordon's new T.33 supercar. Yes, Gordon's been a busy boy, because the T.33 is the second all-new supercar from GMA. The £2.4 million T50, which nobody outside of the company has driven yet, although customer car production is supposed to be starting anytime now, remains the ultimate expression of technology and speed. The T33 is something a bit more laid back and a fraction more conventional, or, in Gordon's words, a car where comfort, effortless performance and day-to-day usability are even more front and centre in its character. So the headlines are thus. It comes with the same naturally aspirated, Cosworth developed, incredible V12 as the T50, albeit re-engineered for slightly fewer revs, slightly more torque at lower revs, and slightly less power. It's also got, as you can probably see, a more conventional two-seat layout instead of the central driving position three-seater layout you get on the T50, and there's now a choice of a manual gearbox or an automatic. Controversial. It's based around a brand new carbon fibre and aluminium structure, and this carbon fibre bodywork is designed to have an aura of timeless beauty, which I think is Gordon's way of saying it's basically as clean and simple as it can possibly be. No part of this car exists without having a specific function. There's none of the faff, none of the wings and slashes and vents and other stuff that other modern supercars seem to be obsessed with. Before we bring Gordon in, some numbers. Like the T50, only 100 T33s will be built. In fact, GMA will only ever build 100 of each car it makes. The target weight is under 1100 kilograms, about 100 kilograms more than T50, and the 3.9 litre V12 produces 607 brake horsepower. That's 47 horsepower less than the T50, and the same 335 pounds-feet of torque. Power to weight, 556 brake horsepower per tonne. Rev limit, 11,100 RPM versus 12,100 RPM in the T50. But fear not. According to the literature, a new RAM induction and exhaust system will ensure a spine-tingling signature sound. I'm literally salivating at the thought. By the way, the T33 will be the last non-hybrid GMA supercar. After that, expect some e-assist, but Gordon says his mission is to keep this V12 going as long as he can. Gordon, thank you so much for having us again. I wanted to start with something that you're quoted as saying in the press release, and that is, we are unlike every other car manufacturer. We are not chasing trends. We are not chasing headline performance figures. We're not chasing sales, nor will we ever be. And I just wanted you to explain a little bit more about what you meant by that.
That's relatively simple. So we haven't got a massively complex management structure. We have very supportive shareholders. And for a start, that's unlike any other OEM. But actually, we have 7 guiding principles, 4 of them technical and 3 of them to do with the customer. And we've promised everybody now and in the future, we'll stick to those 7 principles. So on the technical side, it's number 1's driving perfection. So the target above all else, above top speed, performance, 0 to 60, whatever, is driving perfection. Lightweighting, of course. Engineering art. Every bit of the car, whether the owner will ever see it or not, is a piece of engineering art. And then to make sure the car is exclusive, we promise we'll never make more than 100 of anything. That's a model or a variant. So this one, for example, there'll be 3 variants, 100 of each, and we've promised they'll be very, very different.
And the variants are going to be?
We're not sure yet. We're still working on that. It probably will follow the standard sort of automotive trends.
A spider and a
yeah, but the reason why we're not announcing it yet is I don't want to say it's going to be a full spider if we can't deliver that, basically.
Okay.
So premium quality, absolutely limited volumes to keep it exclusive. And the other thing is the customer journey is really important to us. And now we're in the middle of spec sessions for T50.
Yeah,
and
we actually came down. We came down to see
Of course you did. Yes, of course you did.
On
the feedback we're getting from customers is that they don't get that anywhere else at any other OEM. So there's those principles we absolutely stick to.
And you're going to you're speccing every T50 with every single customer.
I am.
I mean, you've only got so many hours in the day.
I know.
You can't sell more than 100 cars, or you won't be able to see them all.
I'm really enjoying it. And the most important thing from a T33 point of view is the seventh principle is a return to beauty.
Okay.
So we're absolutely not following, as we said in the press release, we're not following current trends. There seems to be a sort of a race on with supercar manufacturers to make something more dramatic, bigger holes.
Yeah, holes and slash.
And there's a lot of stuff on cars now, even very well-known manufacturers, that actually doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
There's nothing on this car. I'll challenge you. There's nothing on this car that doesn't do something.
Well, I do have an engineering degree. I haven't actually used it for many years, but I'll see if I can find something. And we'll come to the design in just a second. But first, I wanted to learn a bit more about how this car was born in your head. So, did you come up with the idea for the T33 before T50 at the same time? Is it a package of cars that exist in your mind?
It's a motor car I've wanted to do for perhaps 25, maybe even 30 years, long before 50.
Okay.
Around about the time we were doing the F1, in fact. The F1 was very specific, like 50, the halo car again, central driving position. I mean, we always promised people 50 would be the halo car, and it always will be. We're not going to do another one of those.
No.
The Aero, central driving position, 12,000 revs, sub 1,000 kilos, that's it.
That'll do for a halo car,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
But around that time, my growing up period was the 60s, and particularly with sports racing cars of that period. I loved some of the cars in that period. And the reason why people still go ooh and ah about some of them is that they've just got classic proportions and lovely shapes. Now, we applied that to 50, but of course 50 also is quite radical with the fan and stuff. So I've always wanted to do, a car that has all those influences, but in absolutely no way retro. Not what Ferrari are doing, not what Lambo are doing. Just a modern, crisp car, but with that feeling from the 60s.
So that's really interesting. So talk to us about, because I think you're right. I came in here and having sort of talked to you a bit about it in the past, I suppose I was expecting something that was more overtly retro, a real sort of blast from the past. But actually, it's not. It's just kind of clean and simple and kind of its own car. But there are little references here and there from cars in your own collection and cars from that period you're talking about. So why don't we have a little walk around the car and you just point out some bits that
sure.
have significance.
Absolutely.
In the design.
I mean, the first thing you'll notice, for example, there's not a lot in the way of ducting.
Yeah.
We try and,
some air coming in here.
Everything's got a purpose. That is obviously engine, oil, and water. One of the signatures of 60s cars that all the headlamps were one above the other. They weren't like the F1 and like T50 where they're wide, if you like. And the other bit in the 60s is this graphic ran right down to the front of the car. Now with modern cars you can't do that because there's what they call a pendulum test, which is a real pain, but you have to do it, which comes in at about 30 degrees and smack this and the light can't break.
Yeah.
So I worked with the guys in the studio. This was a very early sketch I did where the graphic goes all the way down to the bottom, but this is the front brake duct.
Okay.
And this little vein here picks up the pendulum and saves the light. But you've got the graphic going all the way down to the front. It's that sort of stuff. And that goes all the way through the motor car, really.
Okay. Let's have a walk down the side here, because, I mean, the interesting thing is we walk down the side and it's just so clean and simple here that really there's not much to talk about other than a little bit of more shape in the side sills than you get with the T50, and there's a reason for that.
There is, in fact, because the one drawback with a three-seat car is that, particularly if you're on a narrow car, is that the cabin obviously has to be wide because you've got three occupants, even though they're offset with the shoulder and the hip width difference. So the two things that happen is you get quite a wide motor car with very little chance of any plan fall, any Coke bottle we call it.
Yeah. Hips.
The other thing you lose is a bit of tumble home, which is the angle that the cabin falls in. And the more tumble home you can get, and still drop the glass, of course.
Tumble home, what a fantastic word. Never heard that.
That makes the car more sporty. Mm-hmm. So with this, I've worked with Kevin Richards and our studio team to optimize the tumble home, get this a little bit narrower, but also leave ourselves enough to get a proper planform, Coke bottle.
Amazing. Now, there's an interesting story with this Ram Aerotape,
Yes.
isn't there? Because obviously this is just a model, so we're not going to see it moving today, but tell us a bit about how that's fixed to the engine and the significance of all of
Yeah,
that.
so that's a little bit wacky. That's the sort of thing we can get away with, I think, as a small company.
Yeah.
On the F1 and the 50, this ram induction is part of the monocoque, actually. So once you come past the bulkhead, you have to have some sort of flexible coupling because the engine rocks, of course. It's rubber mounted. I've always wanted to do a car like a 1970s Formula One car where the airbox, the ram induction, goes straight onto the engine and moves with the engine. Yeah. So this is completely separate from the body.
That's fantastic. So you're sitting there at the lights revving your engine, this is just wobbling. Wow.
And it's got a secondary benefit too, because lifting it up here and not being part of the chassis allows us to bleed off the boundary layer, so we can make the intake slightly smaller and it becomes more aerodynamically efficient.
Wow. All those benefits. Look, it's a cool feature to show your mates. It's got aerodynamic benefits. Looks great. Now, it's a practical car, this. It's been, would you call it a supercar GT? It's certainly leaning...
I don't like the GT connotation. It doesn't, with me, it doesn't sit comfortably with a mid-rear engine supercar, you know. But you're right. I mean, like 50, you know, we mustn't forget, 50's got some decent luggage space and some very serious interior stowage. Decent, once again, all our GMA principles, so proper ride heights, no nose lift or anything required.
Yeah.
Very good visibility, all-round visibility, incredibly low scuttle. The center of the body right over the center of the wheel, so you can place it accurately for hitting the apex.
Yeah.
And once again, luggage capacity. So this actually beats T50. This has got two side lockers here with two cases.
How'd you get into them?
Like 50. This is another bit of a bit wacky. Mm-hmm. So the guys in the studio and myself did not want another shut line through here. It would have just wrecked all this. So this whole panel, this in fact all the way around here is your shut line for your luggage, and there of course.
Yeah.
The hinge point is right by the tail light, and this whole side opens like an old-fashioned suicide door.
Wow.
And then you stand, these are dihedral.
Yes.
So these come up, and for safety, the latch to release this is in the door jamb. And then you release this, and once the door's out of the way, you can stand here, and the luggage is actually right there. So you just drop. This opens to about here.
Okay.
Yep.
So you're not right out
opens
here.
to like a conventional door.
Okay.
And then you just drop the luggage in from the top. So there's two cases each side there, and then in the nose, there's another two cases in there.
Okay.
So it's 280 litres altogether, which is like, you know, small hatchback.
That's enough. Fuel under here?
Yeah, these flip up too, so there's a lot of hinge, a lot of closures on
this. You wouldn't know.
Well, that was the whole point. You know, it wanted to look like people going, whoa, hold on a minute, there's no openings anywhere, but in fact, everything opens. So these are both top hinged. One is fuel and one is oil.
Yep.
And then, of course, we've got an active spoiler on the back as well.
Again, which is
and this hinges up as well for access.
Okay. And round the back, I think the rear angle is my favourite. But again, it's just simple, clean, circular lights. Is there anything back here? Any particular?
Yeah, we don't do the melted Japanese LED lights. You know, I can't stand all that stuff. It's 5 years' time. It looks old-fashioned.
Yeah.
You know?
No.
And I don't do funny shaped exhausts either. They're round.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So engine. I think we've beat around the bush long enough. In fact, you've got one on a stand over here. Should we wander over there?
Let's go and have a look.
So, if you're a cynic, you might just say you've taken the you've taken the T50's V12 and detuned it so as not to step on the T50's toes. But I imagine a lot more's gone into it than that.
Absolutely, yeah. The one word you've got wrong there is detuned.
Okay.
We've retuned it, and with a lot of it is 50, funnily enough, because as we said earlier, we've promised everybody that would be the halo car. And to be honest, 12,000 revs with a 4-litre V12 is a bit on the limit. You know, it really is. And I pushed Cosworth to do 12,000 revs. 11,000 is a lot more sensible. But it also it gave them the opportunity, and us the opportunity, to look at retuning the engine to be even more drivable. Not that the T50 isn't. I mean, now that I've driven it several times with that weighted motor car, it's got ridiculous low-down torque. You know, but we've taken that to another level on this. It's got different cylinder heads, different cams, of course. Obviously, different mapping for the valve timing. Completely different induction system, and a very different exhaust system, and even a different engine mounting system, so the engines aren't interchangeable. So this gives, believe it or not, this gives 75% of max torque at 2.5, but more importantly, it gives 90% of max torque from 4.5 to 10.5, which is ridiculous for an engine that revs to 11,000 and is still over 600 horsepower.
Yeah. Wow. And as you were telling me a story earlier actually about driving around Millbrook, I think, in fifth gear. Right?
Yeah.
So just it's a lovely demonstration of the torque.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite amazing actually. And what was demonstrating the torque capacity of the T50 was the fact that we and the test drivers and myself, we got out of 50 and somebody had borrowed the latest GT3 911, and below 5, it felt like a hot hatch. You know, from 6 to 9, that engine is delicious. You know, the sound and the pull, it just goes on and on to 9,000. But below 5 is just nothing. You know, absolutely nothing. And I just jumped out of 50, which pulls from 2,000 revs. Yeah.
Fantastic. And we've got to talk about the gearbox. So, 6-speed X-Track manual as per the T50, but you also wanted to offer an automatic option in this. Talk us through why.
It's not just a transmission, actually. You know, because there's 3 variants, and overall of this architecture, 300 cars. I thought, I shot myself in the foot again here, keep doing it. I thought we'd have to offer something a bit more sort of varied, if you like. Mm-hmm. So we thought, right, left and right hand drive, fine, yep. Because most people throw up their hands in horror at 300 cars building left and right hand drive. But if it's designed in from the beginning, it's easy. Yeah. And that was the one thing. And the other thing was full federal type approval, which added 28 million quid to the program. But we just figure, you know, we're a proper little car company now, we're going forward. Keeping on with show or display importation just makes people a bit nervous, quite rightly, because it could change at any time. And then the third thing was an offer of a paddle shift gearbox, where it's a mighty transmission. It's the fastest gear change ever made on a road car.
And it's a single clutch, double clutch?
It doesn't have any clutches. It has a clutch on the flywheel for pulling off. Yeah. And after that, there aren't any clutches. There's no dogs, there's no clutches. It's a completely, there is zero torque interrupt. So it's what we call a seamless change. So, you know, you get other companies claiming a few milliseconds for this and this. Yeah. This is absolutely no torque drop. So it's a pre-selector box. So you're already in the next gear. It's an X-Track design. All you have to do is release the one you're in, and you're already in the next gear. So it's totally seamless.
And you said you shot yourself in the foot because obviously you took on this automatic gearbox development program, assuming the uptake might be, I don't know, 50-50. Yes. How's it been so far with orders?
Well, yes, yeah. Can we talk about something else? No. Yeah. So, you know, the standard car is manual because that's our driving perfection. But as I say, to make it a little bit more appealing to a broader audience, if you like, we're offering the paddle shift. And so far, the car isn't officially on sale until after the launch, but we've done some quiet pre-sales with, of course, T50 owners and people that miss T50. Because of all the cars we're going to do, this is the closest relative to 50. So we've already sold more than half the cars, and out of those, I think three only are pedal shifts. So
it's going to be the most spectacular collector's item, a T33 Auto.
I don't know what I'm going to say to the team if we get to the 100 cars and only 5 of them are paddle shifts, because it's cost a fortune to develop the gearbox.
You've got these other 2 variants coming. They may lend themselves more to an auto. The work's done.
Yeah, so it's a great combination. We got the fastest engine response in any car on the planet and the fastest gear change, if you have that combination.
Well, it's very nice to have. All right, let's move a bit on to aerodynamics. Obviously, super clean, this car. There is no obvious ways on the top surface that is creating downforce apart from the pop-up spoiler. So I'm sure there's some clever things going on underneath it.
Yeah, so once again, with this sort of styling, obviously we didn't want to have front lips and things sticking out, splitters and bits like dive planes and all that sort of stuff. The downforce target is slightly less than T50, which helps. But the reason why we got away with the front end, if you remember on T50, is because the diffuser is very steep, and we draw off the boundary layer here, which means instead of the diffuser making its downforce back here, it actually makes it nearer the center of gravity, which means we don't have to generate too much on the front. So with this one, of course, we have no fan. But when we were doing the months of development on the fan, we found once, when we were developing the kick point and the shape of the diffuser and the size of the duct, we switched the fan off and we still got 30% more downforce than not having the fan on. So 70% reduction, but still 30% more than you would expect. And what we found was the duct that went back to the fan, of course, empties into the base suction behind the car, and the base suction was pulling enough air through the slot
to get a version of the same effect.
We stuck that idea in the bank, and we spent a few months with the engineering team and our aerodynamics chap on this, and we've developed a softer diffuser, but it still has the big kick point here, just not as much as the fan, and we get about 30% of the downforce without the fan, which means, once again, we don't need too much on the front. So the diffusers on the front are hidden in the front wheel arch. So we don't need a splitter.
Oh, wow. Wheels, brakes, tyres, suspension. I mean, it's a similar story on the T50, isn't it? By being light, you can use slightly narrower tyres, more off-the-shelf
It's actually
tyres.
the same size because the car's slightly heavier, doesn't produce quite as much downforce. It's the same tyre size, so it's 235, 295.
And the car's slightly bigger, just while we're on dimensions.
Yeah, it's exactly the same width, but it's about 45 mil longer, and the wheelbase is 35 mil longer. But it's still Porsche Boxster size, Lotus.
But same tyre, and this is all about, you don't want these special custom-made tyres that cost 10 grand a corner.
Not at all. Not at all. I think a set of these is under £1,000. And this Michelin is a fantastic tyre. The 4S is a brilliant tyre, really good all-round tyre.
Hydraulic steering?
Hydraulic power assistance, The trick system we had on 50 is highly complex to develop, and it works very well, but this time we've gone for, I couldn't bring myself to do electric steering. It's the one thing that lets my A110 Alpine down. It's interesting, we just, from the point of view of being usable, obviously it's things like, the visibility and the luggage and the egress, ingress, all that sort of stuff. But the other thing we've done our first fuel consumption figures on T50, sort of commuting, touring, average figures. And we've got a range of about 450 miles on that car. And this one, although it has a slightly smaller fuel tank, it'll still do 400 miles.
How big's the tank?
On the tank, 75 litres.
And 80 on T50?
80 on 50, yeah.
Well, that's enough, isn't it?
Yeah.
400 miles.
It's a sort of, and hopefully, it's a sort of supercar that people will use. What we've noticed with 50 owners, a lot of them have Carrera GTs that they still use. And this is like a Carrera GT on steroids. Another few thousand revs.
I imagine smaller, right?
Much smaller, yeah. And a couple of 100 kilos lighter, and it has luggage space, which of course the Carrera GT doesn't.
Of course. And you said you've been looking at some numbers upstairs. This is pretty much bang on a Lotus Emira, the new Lotus Emira,
very
in terms
much,
of dimensions.
Yeah, Boxster Emira,
Just with a 600 horsepower
Just
plus
yes.
V12 in the back and everything else. It's going to be ridiculously quick.
We sort of take that V12 for granted now because we've been around for 2 years or 2.5 years, but it is just the best. We said right at the beginning we hoped it would be the best road car engine ever. Yeah. And now we've driven T50, we know it is. Yeah. You know, we can categorically say this car has got the best V12 on the planet.
I spoke to Dario and he basically said he was trying to take it seriously. The first time he took it to 12,000 RPM, he was trying, I'm serious testing here, and he just burst out laughing and he came back into the pits. How's that, Dario? All good? He's just wetting himself because it's so much fun.
It is a magic engine.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, interior. Now, again, this is just a model, so there's no interior on this, but similar aim to the T50, driver focus, analog?
Yes, ethos-wise, absolutely. The driving perfection again, very much carryover ethos from 50, but of course offset. So no touch screens. We've got all the connectivity you want with Apple CarPlay and stuff like that, but absolutely no touch screens, no column stalks. All the secondary controls are rotary, machined from aluminium, analog. Everything's floodlit, nothing's backlit. So it's, and still with the 120mm analog rev counter. So absolutely the same focus we had on 50. Yeah.
It's just that you're sitting in the middle on the 50.
Yeah.
Which is
the
an experience.
The USP and the halo effect, if you like. But this is the sort of car we want people to just want to get out and want to get back in again.
Yes, exactly. And I remember you talking with the T50, the way that you tune the thickness of the carbon on the roof, because it's the intake noise and the vibrations above your head that's what makes your ears happy.
Yep.
Not the exhaust noise, because that's behind you. Similar story here, is it?
Absolutely, yeah. So the pulse, we just have to work on the layup in this area here. So the pulse coming back out of here will affect this just in the same way.
Yeah. Okay, I think we've covered most of it. So T50, sorry to talk about money, 2.4 million, 100 cars sold out.
Yep.
Price of this one?
This is 1.37.
1.37?
Yeah.
Okay.
So a bargain.
A bargain, yes. When we're talking about these sorts of numbers, that is a bargain. 100 cars. And there's one thing that I also wanted to pull you up. I started with a quote from you, so I'm going to end with a quote from you. And if you give me a second, I just got to get it off my phone now. You said, if you had to have only one supercar, the T33 is it. Now, you're talking about the usability, and if you... a T50 being more of a high days and holidays car, and this has got that extra piece of usability. So, if you could only drive a T50 or a T33 for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I think it would still have to be the T50.
There goes the...
But it's just, it's more extreme, of course. The engine's more extreme, the central driving position, the aero's more extreme. The aero's got many more functions and things to play with. But honestly, you know, I think this is, it's a 50, but just even more usable, really. And I don't think anybody's going to feel too much of difference on the weight being about 100 kilos heavier. It's still under 1,100 kilos and still a better power to weight ratio than a McLaren F1. It's crazy. I think in an ideal world, you'd have a T50 for those very special drives, those very special moments, and maybe one of these to use a little more often. But I'd sign up for that. I'm in dreamland now. Thank you so much, Gordon. Thank you for having us. Pleasure.